from everyday life, grapevines and seeds and trees, to illustrate his points and help the people understand what he was trying to teach them. And so in the parable today, Jesus uses the familiar idea of the two sons to tell his story. And Alyssa was right, and it doesn't necessarily have to be two sons, because in the original Greek it's teknon, which means child, so two children. Two children, but it traditionally gets interpreted as the parable of the two sons. And so the father goes to his two children and says, "Children, go work in my vineyard." And you couldn't see the book, but in the book, it's apple trees. They're picking apples. So it doesn't seem like that big a distinction. Apples, grapes, what's the difference? But it actually does matter, because the vineyard was the national symbol of Israel. Kind of like when you see a bald eagle, you think America. For them, a vineyard meant Israel. And so when they hear a story of a father saying, "Go work in my vineyard," they know that what Jesus is talking about is God the Father saying, "Go work among my people." So I got grapes. I got home from VBS yesterday, and my daughter was sitting there eating a bowl of grapes and went, "No, those are my crops. Don't eat those." She didn't eat too many. But the father, it says, "Go work in my vineyard." And one of the sons says, "No, I will not go." And that represents the people who say no to God, who rebel against God, who break God's rules, who say, "God, I am not going to do what your word says." But eventually, the son does. And so, as Jesus is telling this parable, he's illustrating that, yes, there may be some who say no to God. There may be people who have rejected God. But eventually, if they say yes, they produce fruit and they please God, even though maybe they originally dishonored God by saying no. And so these are the people that the Bible calls the prostitutes, the tax collectors, the sinners, because they eventually clearly said no to God by breaking his law. But they came through in the end and repented. In the story, there's the second child, and the second child says, "Yes, I will help you," but doesn't. And that represents the people who do say yes to God, the people who are in the temple, the people who bring the sacrifices, the people who call themselves followers of God, and yet somehow they don't do what God says. And time again, the prophets come and they say, "You're bringing these sacrifices, but you're ignoring the poor. You're ignoring the hungry. You're ignoring the sick. You say you're my children, but you're hard-hearted." And so in the end, even though they say all the right things, because they're not doing them, they're not pleasing the Father. And I think it's an important parable for us church people to hear, because sometimes we do say all the right things. And sometimes we use church as an excuse to check it off the box and say, "Well, I go to church. Never mind how I act the rest of the week." And so Jesus wants them to know that it's not just what the young men told their father, what they promised. It's not just about saying the right thing. It's about your actions and the fruit that you produce of how you live out your life. And so we're going to hear in a little while about a mission trip, and we're going to hear about Vacation Bible School, and we're going to think about the ways that we as a church are actually doing what we say, that our actions are matching the things that we say are important. So I could pretty much be done with the sermon at this point. You guys could go to lunch early, because that's really it. That's the point of it. But there's something more I want to say, because I think often words like this of Jesus's get misused. And we take them and run with them in a direction that God does not intend. So I want to tell you a story. Several years ago, before I was a pastor, I was at a church, and I went to a luncheon, a church lady lunch, a UMW lunch, and the ladies did a skit. And it was a skit intended to teach us a lesson, and they were great. They had costumes, they were wonderful actresses. And in the skit, there are people who are going to the gates of heaven to be asked to be let in. Except it wasn't just the gates of heaven, it was like the desk of a hotel. So there was a woman sitting at the hotel desk letting people into heaven if they were good enough. And so the first character comes, and she's dressed like a Southern belle, and she looks beautiful, and she says, "I need a room, please, and I'd like it to be nice, and I always was at church, and I always cooked food for the potluck," and she goes on, and it's clear as she's going about her little speech that she is a big snob, and she thinks she deserves everything. And so as she's doing this, she eventually starts crying too, because the woman at the desk says, "I don't see your name here. There's no room for you." go downstairs, second door to the left. And she leaves in a huff. The second character comes and she's dressed beautifully and she says, I need a room. There should be a room for me here. I give money to the church. And she goes on, and it's clear that she's very greedy, that she just cares about money. And so the person at the desk says, sorry, you're not on the list. Go downstairs, second door to the left. And the skit goes on, and everybody kind of laughs as these people kind of get what's coming to them, right? And the way the skit ends is there's a woman who's sweeping the floor, cleaning quietly in the background, and the woman at the desk says, there's a room for you. It's the best one. Come. And that's the end of the skit. Well, that's about what Jesus says, right? That skit really bothered me. I thought about it for a long time after. It really bothered me. And I'll tell you why it bothered me. It bothered me because we were essentially laughing at people being sent to hell. I mean, that's kind of what it was. Go down the stairs. You don't get into heaven. Ha, ha, ha. Look at them. And I'm thinking, we should not be laughing about anybody going to hell. This is a terrible skit. Now, you might think, get over it, Stella. I mean, it's just a skit. But I think it expresses kind of a bigger problem of what we do with Jesus' words. Instead of saying, what is Jesus saying to me? We say, what is Jesus saying to you? Ooh, Pharisees, Sadducees. We want to point the finger at somebody else. And we say, ooh, those rich people, those church people. Church people get beat up a lot lately. Have you noticed that? I mean, to be called religious is kind of an insult. I don't even tell people I'm religious. I'm a pastor. We like to put down other people, especially other Christians. It's surprising how much that happens. And we want to think about, well, we're the good Christians. They're the bad Christians. I was talking to a friend of mine who's Jewish, and he said, he doesn't like Christians because they always tell him he's going to hell. And I said, well, I've been told I'm going to hell by someone who thinks women shouldn't be pastors. We love to do that. We love to beat up on each other. Why do we do that? And so I was thinking about this skit way too much, as I said, and I thought, how can we stop doing this to each other? Because this isn't what Jesus wants us to do with his words. He wants us to hear him. And the people who said no to God need to know that they're breaking the law, and Jesus has things to say to them. And the people who don't follow God's will and are hypocrites, they need to hear too. We all sin differently, and we all need to hear different messages from Jesus and take it to heart instead of pointing at people who sin differently than we do and thinking we're somehow better. So I was thinking about this skit, and have you ever watched a movie and you didn't like the way it ended, so you made up your own ending in your head? Like, if I was the writer, here's how I would end the movie, right? Just thinking, okay, if I was going to do that skit, what would I do? And I decided that I would just march right into the scene, and I would go down the stairs. And I would walk down there, and there would be all those people sitting at the bottom of the stairs who had been sent there, told to go to hell, basically. And they wouldn't have gone through the door, because who's going to go through that door, right? They're all just sitting there. And I look around, and I see the faces of people who have been told to go to hell. And y'all, I have seen the faces of people who have been told to go to hell. Maybe you have too. We've all seen the faces of people who have been told you're not good enough, you're not welcome, you're wrong, you're bad, don't even bother. We've all seen the faces of people who have given up on church, and I've seen a lot of them. So I go down there and I look at these people and I go, no, this isn't what Jesus said. These are stairs, and stairs work both ways. We're going up. And I lead them up the stairs, and we go to the woman at the desk, and I say to the woman at the desk, Jesus has paid the price. There's rooms for them. They get to come in. Ha! Dramatic music, right? That's how I would end it. I decided when I was rewriting this skit in my head that what I want to be is the pastor of the church at the bottom of the stairs. I want to be somebody who is with the people who have been told they don't matter, telling them that what they've been told isn't true, that they do matter, that there is a place. There's a place for all of us. There's a place for religious people and people who have not walked in the church, that God came for all of us. All of us. And none of us has the right to say Jesus didn't die for you. God came for all of us. We all may sin differently. We all may need to hear different messages. But that's supposed to be what we do as a church, is saying, you matter. God died for you no matter what anybody else told you. Instead, we want to be the one at the desk going, you're in, you're out, we don't like you. We love to be in that position instead of being the one that goes down the stairs and brings them back up. And so I hope that that's what we'll be together, the church at the bottom of the stairs that goes and rescues those people who have been sent down. And I love what I have seen so far of this church, the way people have done what they say they're going to do. So you get to hear from some of them this morning. First, I want to invite our missionaries to come up and talk to us about their trip. And I'm going to sit out here so I can see the pictures, not like last service where I couldn't.